Welcome to RankLens. Today, we count down the top 10 boldest corporate pivots that actually worked. Every company fears obsolescence, but some of history's greatest enterprises didn't just survive reinvention, they dominated after it. We're counting down the boldest pivots in business, transformations so radical, so desperate, so utterly brilliant that they turn near death into dynasties. These aren't companies that tweaked their model. These are companies that completely abandoned who they were to become something unrecognizable. From unexpected origins to trillion-dollar legacies, we're ranking the pivots that redefined entire industries. Let's start the countdown. At number 10, the Wrigley Company. A pivot so simple it's ingenious, yet so successful it shaped an entire industry. In the early 1900s, Wrigley wasn't in the gum business at all. The company's core operation was selling soap and baking powder to households across America. Both were practical products, but neither had the growth potential Wrigley envisioned. That's when inspiration struck. They began including free sticks of chewing gum with each purchase as a promotional gift. Customers were fascinated, and something unexpected happened. They loved the gum far more than the soap or powder. Sales of the gum skyrocketed, so Wrigley made a decisive call. They abandoned soap and baking powder entirely and committed all resources to manufacturing and marketing chewing gum. That single pivot transformed the Wrigley Company into the world's dominant chewing gum maker, a position it held for over a century, from household staples to a global gum empire. At number 9, Amazon, the pivot that quietly built the digital backbone of the internet. When Amazon launched in 1994, it was laser-focused on a single mission: sell books online. For years, Amazon was an online bookstore, nothing more. But Bezos and his team noticed something crucial. Their warehouse infrastructure and server technology were incredibly sophisticated, yet they sat mostly idle during off-peak seasons. That excess capacity was essentially free money being left on the table. In 2006, Amazon made a bold sideways pivot. They launched Amazon Web Services, or AWS, offering cloud infrastructure to other companies. At the time, it seemed like a bizarre distraction for a bookseller. Today, AWS has become a staggering business, powering much of the internet. Netflix, Spotify, Airbnb, and countless others run on Amazon's cloud. The online bookstore became a tech infrastructure giant, generating more profit than the entire retail business. At number 8, Slack, a chat platform born from failure. Slack didn't emerge from venture-backed ambition, it emerged from the wreckage of a failed startup. TinySpec was a gaming company that bet big on a multiplayer online game. The game failed spectacularly. Investors abandoned the project, and the studio faced shutdown. But before the lights went out, the team had built something for themselves, an internal communication tool to keep everyone connected across the collapsing project. Rather than let that tool vanish, the founders asked a critical question: what if this internal tool was actually the real product? They pivoted the entire company. Instead of making games, they would focus exclusively on workplace communication software. Slack launched and disrupted an entire category. Today, Slack is the de facto standard for team collaboration worldwide. A failed game studio accidentally created one of the most essential tools in modern work infrastructure. That's not just a pivot, that's redemption. At number 7, Nokia, a story spanning 160 years of radical reinvention. Nokia's saga doesn't start with phones. It starts in 1865 as a paper mill in Finland. A paper mill. For the first century, Nokia was a forest products company, cutting trees, making paper. That was the business. But Nokia's leadership understood something vital. Industries die, and companies must evolve or perish. So they pivoted, then pivoted again. Nokia moved into rubber manufacturing, then electronics, then telecommunications equipment. Each generation abandoned the old to chase the new. The most dramatic pivot came in the 1980s and 90s, when Nokia bet everything on mobile phones, a category barely anyone understood yet. As the cellular revolution exploded, Nokia dominated. By the late 1990s, Nokia was the world's largest mobile phone maker. One company, born in a 19th century paper mill, became the king of the mobile revolution. That's not adaptation. That's multi-generational survival through radical reinvention. At number 6, Fujifilm, the film company that recognized the cliff and jumped toward it. For most of the 20th century, Fujifilm and Kodak were locked in a legendary rivalry. Both were giants of film photography. Both made film stock. Both made cameras. Both built fortunes on photography. Then, digital happened. Digital happened fast. Film became obsolete in a generation. Kodak doubled down on film and bet it would survive. It didn't. Kodak collapsed into bankruptcy. Fujifilm looked at the exact same market, the exact same cliff, and made a radically different choice. We're abandoning film. Fujifilm pivoted aggressively into pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, medical imaging, and materials science. Their film expertise in chemistry translated into entirely new sectors. Today, Fujifilm is a thriving, profitable pharmaceutical and imaging company. Kodak's fiercest rival didn't just survive the death of film, they thrived by leaving it behind. Two companies faced the same apocalypse. One adapted, one didn't. At number 5, Netflix, the suicide mission that somehow succeeded. For nearly a decade, Netflix's entire business was built on mailing DVDs to your house in red envelopes. It was profitable. It was reliable. It was their cash cow, the thing that made money and kept shareholders happy. Then streaming technology emerged, and Reed Hastings, Netflix's CEO, made a decision that seemed absolutely insane. We're going to kill our own business. Netflix would cannibalize its DVD revenue by investing billions into streaming infrastructure and original content. They would accept years of massive losses. Wall Street hated it. Shareholders panicked. Industry analysts called him crazy. But Hastings saw the future clearly. Streaming was inevitable, and Netflix had to lead it or die trying. That bet looked suicidal in 2008. By 2010, it looked genius. Today, Netflix dominates global streaming and has fundamentally reshaped entertainment. They won spectacularly by destroying their own golden goose. Few companies have the courage to kill their cash cow. Fewer still have the vision to replace it with something bigger. At number 4, Nintendo, the playing card company that conquered video games. Since 1889, Nintendo sold playing cards. That was the business cards, playing cards, for over 80 years. The company was founded in Japan's Meiji era and built its fortune on traditional paper products. But in the 1970s, Nintendo's leadership saw opportunity in a new frontier: toys and games. Electronic toys, video games, a category almost nobody understood. Nintendo started small with arcade games, then took a massive bet on the home console market. In 1983, after the video game industry had crashed and burned, Nintendo released the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. It was revolutionary. It saved the entire industry. The NES became a global phenomenon. From that moment forward, Nintendo was no longer a card company. They became the world's most dominant video game company, a position they've held for decades. A company born in the 19th century as a card printer became the ruler of a digital entertainment empire. That's over a century of evolution, culminating in unmatched, multi-generational success. At number 3, IBM, the near-death experience that sparked a company-saving reinvention. In 1993, IBM reported a devastating $8 billion loss, the largest loss in U.S. corporate history at the time. The company was hemorrhaging money. IBM was trapped in the declining mainframe business. making massive computers for enterprises that were increasingly shifting to personal computers and distributed computing. The future looked dark. Stock was tanking. Creditors circled. The company seemed headed toward extinction. Then Lou Gerstner took over as CEO. He made a bold, counterintuitive decision. Stop trying to dominate every layer of computing. IBM had been trying to control the whole stack, from chips to software to systems. Gerstner's pivot was sharp. Refocus from hardware to services, consulting, system integration, managed services, solutions. That shift meant abandoning the old identity IBM had cherished for decades. But it worked. IBM transformed from a hardware giant into a services powerhouse. That pivot saved one of history's largest companies from extinction and kept them relevant for another 30 years. At number 2, Marvel Entertainment, the bankruptcy to blockbuster transformation. In 1996, Marvel filed for bankruptcy. The comic book company that owned Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Avengers, and so many other iconic characters was in financial freefall. For decades, Marvel had licensed its characters to other studios that made movies and reaped enormous profits, while Marvel earned modest royalties. It was a losing proposition. The company couldn't sustain itself. But Marvel's leadership made a daring decision. Rather than continue licensing characters cheaply to Hollywood, Marvel would build its own film studio. They would produce the films themselves. For a bankrupt company, it seemed reckless, impossible even. But they committed to the pivot. Marvel Studios was born. They began producing their own films, building what became known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Today, Marvel dominates the global box office through the MCU. The franchise that nearly died in bankruptcy became one of the most powerful entertainment forces in the world. A desperate pivot transformed a near-extinct comic publisher into a global entertainment empire. At number 1, Apple, the resurrection. Nobody thought possible. In 1997, Apple was 90 days away from bankruptcy. The company that had pioneered the personal computer was collapsing. The Mac had been magnificent, but Apple couldn't compete with Windows. Market share was evaporating. The company was burning cash. Investors had given up. Apple needed a miracle. Then Steve Jobs returned. His first decision: don't fix the computer division. Instead, release the iMac, a radical, beautiful redesign that said, computing isn't about specs, it's about design. People responded. But the real pivot came later. In 2001, Apple released the iPod, a sleek digital music player. When the industry was fragmented and clunky, it revolutionized how people listened to music. Then, in 2007, came the iPhone. Jobs didn't enter the smartphone market, he invented it. A computer company had become a consumer electronics giant. Today, Apple is the most valuable company in history. 90 days from bankruptcy to becoming the world's most valuable empire. That's not just a pivot. That's resurrection. These 10 companies teach us something essential about survival and success. The only way to truly endure is to be willing to die. Every company on this list faced an existential choice: cling desperately to what made them successful in the past, or burn it all down and reinvent entirely. The ones that won weren't the companies that optimized the old model or squeezed a few more years out of a dying business. They were the ones who saw the cliff approaching, accepted the danger, and made the leap. They abandoned their comfort zone. In a world of constant disruption, where technologies and markets shift faster than ever, that willingness to destroy yesterday in service of tomorrow isn't just smart business strategy. It's the difference between legacy and extinction. The boldest pivots become the greatest legacies. And that's the top 10 boldest corporate pivots that actually worked. If you enjoyed this countdown, subscribe to RankLens for more.